Imagine standing on a street corner, watching the entire global financial system collapse around you. Panic is screaming through the air, billionaires are weeping on the trading floor, and the world as you know is burning down. Now imagine that you look at your bank account and realize you just made $100 million in a single day. In today's money, that is over $3 billion. You didn't build a company. You didn't inherit a fortune. You just outsmarted the entire world. This isn't a Hollywood movie. This was the terrifying reality of Jesse Livermore, the greatest stock trader who ever lived. He was a man who started with $5 in his pocket and ended up controlling the destiny of Wall Street. He predicted the two greatest economic crashes in human history and made fortunes so massive they could buy entire nations. But behind the cold, calculating eyes of the boy plunger lay a dark, psychological roller coaster that would ultimately demand the ultimate price. Most people look at the stock market and see numbers, charts, and chaotic noise. Jesse Livermore saw human nature. He understood that the market is not driven by logic, but by two primal forces, fear and greed. For decades, he was an unstoppable ghost on Wall Street, a man who could move markets with a single whisper. He owned yachts that looked like naval ships, mansions that resembled royal palaces, and lived a life of unimaginable luxury. But as the old saying goes on Wall Street, the market gives and the market takes away. Today, we are diving deep into the untold, psychological epic of Jesse Livermore. We will follow him from the muddy farms of New England to the smoke-filled boardrooms of New York, exploring his brilliant strategies, his catastrophic failures, and the haunting mental battles that defined his existence. Whether you are a seasoned investor or someone who has never bought a single stock, this story will change the way you look at money, success, and the human mind forever. Because in the end, Jesse's greatest enemy wasn't the market. It was himself. To understand the man who would one day break Wall Street, we have to travel back to the year 1877, to a bleak, unforgiving farm in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. This was Jesse Livermore's birthplace. Life here wasn't just hard. It was a monotonous, soul-crushing grind. His father was a strict, practical farmer who looked at young Jesse and saw only one thing: an extra pair of hands to pull weeds and plow the dirt. But Jesse was different. Even at a remarkably young age, his mind operated like a high-speed processor. While other boys his age were struggling to read, Jesse was devouring books. He had an quaint photographic memory and an almost terrifying gift for mathematics. He could look at a column of numbers and see patterns where others saw chaos. When Jesse turned 14, his father told him his education was over. It was time to leave school forever and become a full-time farmhand. For his father, this was just the reality of survival. For Jesse, it felt like a death sentence. He looked at the endless fields of dirt and realized that if he didn't run now, he would be buried here. With his mother's quiet blessing and a few coins hidden in his pocket, 14-year-old Jesse climbed out of a window in the dead of night, boarded a horse-drawn delivery wagon, and headed for the city of Boston. He had exactly $5 to his name. When Jesse arrived in Boston, the sheer noise and scale of the city were overwhelming. But destiny guided him straight to the doorstep of Payne Weber, a legitimate stock brokerage firm. Because of his incredible mathematical speed, he was hired on the spot as a chalk boy. His job was simple but exhausting: stand in front of a massive blackboard and update the stock prices by hand as they were yelled out from the telegraph ticker tape. For a normal teenager, this was just a low-paying, repetitive job. But for Jesse, that blackboard was a living, breathing entity. As he wrote thousands of numbers every single day, something magical happened. He began to notice that the numbers didn't move randomly. They had rhythms. They had habits. Jesse started carrying a small leather notebook in his pocket. He didn't write down the names of the companies. He wrote down the prices and how they behaved before they shot up or plummeted. He was mapping the hidden DNA of human behavior through numbers. He realized that the stock market was just a massive theater where thousands of people were acting out their fear and greed over and over again. At age 15, Jesse decided it was time to test his theories. He didn't have enough money to trade on the real New York Stock Exchange, so he walked into a bucket shop. Now let's pause for a second. What on earth is a bucket shop? Think of it as a financial casino. In the late 19th century, bucket shops were highly illegal, sketchy establishments where everyday citizens could bet on whether a stock price would go up or down. You weren't actually buying ownership in a company, you were just placing a wager against the house, much like sports betting today. They were notorious for wiping out poor people because they allowed players to trade with extreme leverage. If a stock dropped even a fraction of a percent, the house wiped out your bet and took your money. Jesse walked up to the counter and placed his first bet on a company called Burlington and Quincy Railroad. He put down $5. A few hours later, he walked out with a profit of $3.12. To a poor farm boy, that felt like winning the lottery. But more importantly, it proved that his notebook was right. His system worked. Within a few months, Jesse was making more money in a single afternoon at the bucket shops than his father made in an entire year on the farm. He became so incredibly accurate that the bucket shop started losing thousands of dollars to this quiet, pale teenager with intense blue eyes. He was pulling off winnings so consistently that the owners gave him a nickname that would follow him into history, the Boy Plunger. Eventually, Jesse's success became his curse. The bucket shops realized that whenever this kid walked in, their profits walked out. They began putting up posters with his face on them. He was banned from every single bucket shop in Boston. He tried wearing disguises, using fake names, and traveling to different cities, but the results were always the same. He won, and they kicked him out. By the time Jesse turned 21, he accumulated over $10,000 in cash. In the late 1890s, that was a small fortune. Boston had become too small for him. The bucket shops were closed to him. There was only one place left for an apex predator to go. Jesse packed his bags, bought a train ticket, and headed for the capital of global capitalism, Wall Street. When Jesse Livermore arrived in New York City, he felt invincible. He was young, wealthy, and possessed a flawless track record. He opened a major trading account at a reputable New York brokerage and prepared to conquer Wall Street just as he had conquered Boston. But Wall Street is not a bucket shop, and Jesse was about to receive the most brutal lesson of his life. In the bucket shops, the prices on the ticker tape were instantaneous. You saw a price, you placed your bet, and you got that exact price. But on the real floor of the New York Stock Exchange, things were very different. There was a devastating phenomenon called slippage and lag. Jesse would look at the ticker tape in his broker's office, see a stock trading at $100, and place an order to buy it. But by the time his order was sent via telegraph to the actual floor of the exchange, processed by a human broker, and executed, minutes had passed. In that short window of time, the price might have jumped to $102. Jesse was buying at a worse price than he intended. Even worse, when he tried to sell, the lag worked against him again. Within a matter of months, Wall Street chewed up the boy plunger and spat him out. His $10,000 vanished into thin air. He was completely broke, deeply in debt, and forced to face the agonizing reality that his perfect system was utterly useless in the real world. The rebirth of a titan. Most people would have broken down. They would have taken the next train back to the farm, defeated and humbled. But Jesse Livermore didn't possess a normal mind. He didn't blame the market, and he didn't blame bad luck. Instead, he locked himself in a room and analyzed his failure with cold, clinical precision. He realized his mistake. He was trading too fast. He was trying to catch minor, short-term fluctuations, just like he did in the bucket shops. But in the real world, those tiny waves were just noise. If he wanted to win on Wall Street, he needed to trade the massive, unstoppable ocean currents. He needed to stop looking at what a stock would do in the next 5 minutes and start predicting what it would do in the next 5 months. To rebuild his capital, Jesse did something incredibly risky. He went back to the Midwestern bucket shops under fake identities, scraped together a few $1,000s by outsmarting them one last time, and returned to New York. This time, he was a completely different animal. He developed a set of trading rules that are still taught in every major investment bank on earth today. He famously wrote, "It was never my thinking that made the big money for me. It was always my sitting." What did he mean by that? He meant that the real wealth wasn't made by constantly buying and selling every single day. The big money was made by identifying a massive macroeconomic trend, placing a massive bet, and having the icy discipline to sit perfectly still while the rest of the world panicked. He also formulated his legendary rule of cutting losses quickly and letting profits run. Jesse realized that human psychology naturally wants to do the exact opposite. When a normal person buys a stock and it starts losing money, they hold on to it, hoping and praying it will bounce back. They let a small loss turn into a catastrophic financial disaster. Conversely, when their stock goes up a little bit, they get scared of losing that small profit, so they sell too early, missing out on a massive fortune. Jesse inverted this human flaw. If a trade went against him by a small percentage, he sold it instantly without emotion. But if a trade went in his direction, he doubled down, adding more and more money to his position as the market proved him right. By 1906, Jesse's new long-term strategy was paying off handsomely. He was back in the millions, but he was waiting for his moment to strike a blow that would resonate through history. In the spring of 1907, the American economy looked phenomenal on the surface. Corporate profits were soaring, real estate was booming, and everyday citizens were borrowing massive amounts of money to buy stocks. The general public believed that the party would never end. But Jesse Livermore was watching the data. He noticed that big insiders and major banks were quietly selling off their holdings. He looked at the massive amounts of debt propping up the entire system and realized that the foundation was rotten. The market was a giant house of cards waiting for a single gust of wind. Jesse decided to go short. For those unfamiliar with the term, short selling is essentially a bet that the market will crash. You borrow shares of a stock, sell them at a high price, and hope to buy them back later at a much lower price to return them, pocketing the difference as pure profit. It is a terrifyingly risky strategy because if the market continues to rise, your potential losses are literally infinite. Jesse began shorting the market with everything he had. But human psychology is an unpredictable beast. The market didn't crash immediately. In fact, it kept grinding higher. Every single day, Jesse was losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. His friends called him crazy. His brokers warned him that he was on the verge of total bankruptcy yet again. But Jesse looked at his charts, looked at the economic reality, and refused to back down. He had the supernatural patience he had promised himself he would maintain. He sat tight. Then, in October 1907, the storm hit. A major banking system failed. Panic spread like a highly contagious virus through Manhattan. Suddenly, everyone wanted their cash out of the banks, but the banks didn't have it. People raced to Wall Street to sell their stocks at any price imaginable. The market didn't just drop. It fell off a cliff. As the entire financial system disintegrated, Jesse Livermore's phone was ringing off the hook. While everyone else was losing their life savings, Jesse's short positions were printing money like a supersonic printing press. In a matter of days, he accumulated over $1 million in cash in a single afternoon, an astronomical sum at the time. The situation became so dire that the entire New York Stock Exchange was on the absolute brink of closing down permanently. There was simply no liquidity left. No one was buying anything. At that critical moment, the legendary financier J.P. Morgan, the most powerful banker in America, stepped in to save the country from a total economic collapse. He locked the wealthiest bankers of New York inside his private library, forcing them to pool their money together to inject liquidity into the system. But J.P. Morgan knew that money alone wouldn't solve the problem if people kept selling aggressively. He needed the selling to stop. He looked around and asked his associates who was driving the massive wave of short selling. The answer was unanimous: Jesse Livermore. J.P. Morgan did something unprecedented. He sent a direct, urgent message to Jesse Livermore. The message was simple but profoundly heavyweight: please stop shorting the market. If you continue, you will destroy the United States economy. Think about the sheer scale of that moment. A boy who ran away from a dirt farm at 14 was now being begged by the king of Wall Street to stop because he single-handedly possessed the financial power to crash the United States of America. Jesse's response showed that despite his ruthless reputation, he understood the big picture. He realized that if the entire country completely collapsed into a dark age, his millions would be worthless paper. He agreed to stop shorting. Not only did he stop, but he actively turned around and began using his fortune to buy stocks at deeply discounted prices, helping to spark a massive relief rally. In a single day, Jesse Livermore went from being a hated market predator to the savior of Wall Street. He walked away from the panic of 1907 with a legendary reputation, an unshakable status, and $3 million in cold cash. He was just 30 years old. In episode 2, we're peeling back the layers on his craziest bets and the ultimate price he paid for the crown of the King of Wall Street. If you want to see how history repeats itself, please hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode.